Before we begin, and I would like to kindly ask the participants of this meeting to fill up the attendance sheet. Only participants, yeah. I've sent the link to the Google form in the meeting chat. اتقوا الله لعلكم تفلحون وقاتلوا من دون الله الذين يقاتلونكم. Mm-mm. Gentle reminder for everyone who has joined. Please do fill up the attendance sheet that I have sent in the meeting chat. That being said, because it is already past 9 a.m. JKT, right? We will start, yeah. So, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. My name is Muhammad Fajrul Alam Renuha, and I will be the moderator for today's event. Yeah, today here we, today we already joined by Dr. Tony Liu, who will be our speaker for today's event. And also, I would like to say first of all, welcome, Pak Tony Liu.
Yeah.
So good morning to everyone, to the Honorable Pak Mujahideen, who is the head of our department, and then to every lecturers who are here with us. Then also Pak Muklason, who is the head of our postgraduate program, head of postgraduate study. And the topic for today is isolation forest. It is a super fast algorithm for anomaly detection. Before we dive into the topic, I would like to invite Pak Muklason, our head of postgraduate program study, to give his opening remarks. Pak Muklason, please kindly open your microphone, and the time is yours.
Okay.
Yeah, monggo.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mas Fajrul. Okay. So, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. Okay. So, good, very good morning, Dr. Tony. Thank you very much for joining us in our postgraduate talk series today. So this program is basically a monthly program for our postgraduate student. So we have around 100 master student, master in information system program, and we have 15 doctoral student at the moment. Okay, so thank you very much for your time. Hopefully it will give the student new insight, new inspiration, yeah, to do research, especially in the machine learning area. I think anomaly detection is very, very important in many areas, such as in security maybe, and banking. So hopefully the student will get new insight from your talk today. And for the student, please ask question maybe in the new research direction. I think it's novel algorithm from Dr. Tony. I think it's quite rarely we get speaker which is the inventor of the algorithm. Okay, so I think enough for the opening remark. So enjoy the talk then. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Yeah, selamat pagi everyone. Nama saya Tony dari Australia. Ibuku dari Surabaya. Just interesting fact. So my mom actually from Surabaya. Now Today talk is about abnormality detection. So it's probably first of all, I would really like to thank Pak Ahmad for the invitation, and it's my pleasure and honor to be speaking here. Today talk is about abnormality detections. It is a rare topic, so we look at 4 pillars of machine learning, right? So classification, regressions, associate rules, clustering, and abnormality detection. So the regression and classification is actually what we call predictive modeling. So this is also one of the pillar in machine learning, or in what you call it, data mining. Early on we have data mining, then now we call it machine learning. Yeah. So as Ahmed say, I really want to encourage people to get into research, and I'll probably talk about how I get the idea and why is it so significant, and what is a breakthrough look like, yeah, in scientific research. So what is abnormality detection? So this is one of the foundation survey paper from ACM Computer Survey, and it defined abnormality detections as problems of finding patterns in data that do not conform to expected behavior. Very broad, very generic, and it will apply to a lot of different things. Now we're gonna narrow it down to the part that isolation forest can solve. So what are abnormally? So some example are listed on the right-hand side. And say, for example, credit card fraud, insurance fraud, cyber intrusions, terrorist activity, breakdown of a system. On the left-hand side, we can see a hyperplane with a few different cluster and also a few different outlier points, and also an outlier cluster. So we have 0, 1 as a one outlier point, which is further away from everyone. Or O1. O2 is actually a outlier point closer to N2. O3 is a clustered abnormally, right? So what does abnormally data look like? Like if you can plot them, they probably look like this. Yeah. And challenges of abnormality detections. So defining a normal regions that encompass every possible normal behavior is very difficult. Yeah, so how do you define what is normal and what is not normal? Unless what is the how do you define it? Yeah, can someone mute themselves? So how do you, is there any rules in the domain that can tell us like what is abnormal and what is not normal? The second challenge is masking and swamping. So masking is some abnormally like to mask themselves, like to hide and make itself look like normal points. Swamping is if you are unusual record, you actually like replicate yourself. You make a lot of copy of yourself such that you look like a normal point. And also the third one is a concept drift problem. So I'll just give you all the names and try to explain what they are. So concept drift is the notions of normal behavior changes with time. So it's not static. All right. And then the fourth one is the exact notation of an abnormality is different. So some say is your distance have to be away, or some say that you have to be so later on in isolation forest we use one very simple definitions. So they are few and they're different. So we'll come to that. But every domain kind of define abnormally differently. Yeah. And the fifth one is the availability of labeled data. Now, abnormality detection by definition is unsupervised learning. There are semi-supervised settings where you get a bit of labeled data. And if you have a lot of labeled data, then it's quite easy to learn. You just pass it through a predictive model, and then you can learn it. But the problem is with abnormality detection is that it's hard to get label data. Like, for example, for a tax office, if they want to label a certain data points, they have to go through an audit. An audit may be like costing them in Australian dollars term like $8,000 just to get one labels, right? So how is it feasible? And also, even if you got one label, for a predictive model to learn, it have to, like, those occurrences have to be repeatable. But the challenge of abnormality detection is that they seems to be all the abnormality seems to be different from one another. So they don't have a set pattern. So also there is a problem of imbalanced data because the positive sample is very small. Also, the last challenge is the data also contain noise. Noise and abnormality is very hard to distinguish between the two. So that roughly cover most of the challenge in the abnormality detection space. Right. Okay. How to now I'll just go through all the existing. There are some specialized technique. If I miss out, if you guys are a researcher, you say, oh, there's a technique that to do that. At least I can tell you there's an angle-based technique that I didn't cover. There's also other like very interesting way to detect abnormally I didn't cover. But broadly, we have classification-based, cluster-based, nearest neighbor-based, statistic-based, information theoretics, spectral applications in cyber intrusion, fraud detections, medical abnormality detections, industrial damage, image processing, textual abnormality detection sensor network. So those are known applications and known big technique. There are interesting technique that I haven't covered, just acknowledging that. Yeah. So types of abnormality, we have points abnormality. So you can see the same graph I have put down the O1, O2, they are point abnormality. Contextual abnormality, you can see the season temperature, and there's a dip in the temperature, maybe in the middle of summer. Okay, and there's also collective abnormality is a heart rate, and then one of the beats is actually extended. Yeah. Okay, now let's move on. Availability of label data also determines how you can approach it. If there's abundant label of label data, then you can use supervised learning. If there is some instant of label data available, you can do semi-supervised learning. I believe isolation forest, there's a variant also do semi-supervised learning, but I'm not going to cover that. It's a bit probably too long and too lengthy for this talk. And unsupervised learning is the isolation forest, the native mode of detections. So there's no label data. We just learn from the data distributions in a way that, but it is not learning from the norm. We are flipping the way around. So probably I will kind of contrast what isolation forest is different from the existing model when I talk about all these different models and give you a hint on why isolations forest is so different. Yeah. Now, classification-based method, you can see this is probably a one-class classifications. You can distinguish between instance belong to different classes. So if you have labeled data or supervised or semi-supervised, you can use this sort of method. So of course, the disadvantage is having to assign a label to each of the test instance. And in some cases, like for fraud detections, you might have a few known cases, but you cannot guarantee the negative sample or the negative data have no fraud in it. Yeah. So the availability of accurate labels is not available. Cluster-based anomaly detection. So you just do a standard clustering on your data set, and you will find all the cluster. And any points that is not within your cluster or outside of your cluster, maybe for distant measure or for usually they use distant measure, and anything that is outside of your cluster, they are anomaly, but they can be noise as well. And then how big is your cluster? How tight is your boundary? Those are difficult to set up. Yeah, and typically for clustering based detections, you have to set up the number of cluster. That is usually the hardest. There are ways to kind of estimate that, but and also clustering based method is very slow, high computational complexity. Yeah. Nearest neighbor based anomaly detection. So there is a notions of local outlying factor, and is using if you look at one point, it's using all the neighbor as a reference. And is there any point that is considered as neighbor but very far away from as compared to its neighbor? So like C1 is not considered as abnormally, but its distance from the nearest neighbor is actually like compared to C2 to this nearest neighbor is actually you can see if we just use a uniform kind of distance measure to say C1 and C2 who are outliers, then C1 is. But if we use the context, the nearest neighbor as the reference, then C1 is not an outlier. So that's the notion of local outlier factor. And in this case, P2 is an outliers, and P1, of course, is an outliers. So P2, in the context of this cluster, smaller cluster on the left lower corner, is an outlier because most of them are quite dense and packed together, right? Yeah. And we have statistic base. This is like a Gaussian kind of distributions, and yeah, abnormally is here, and then anything outside of this shape we call parametric kind of methods. So you have to define the shape, the orientations of the distributions, and you can have a fitting kind of process to fit the Gaussian distributions to the data sample. And then what if the data is not a unimodal? So there might be a few different clouds. So what do you do? And yeah, so that's also the drawback, right? So there's a statistic assumptions of data. If the data fit this assumption, it will work. But if the data doesn't fit this assumption, then it doesn't work. And also it's a distant measure. Distant measure is known to be also very slow, right? So in a sense, I'm saying that isolation forest is not using distance, it's not using density measure, it's not using outlier factor, it's not doing clustering, it's not doing classification. So just give you all the not, like what isolation for is not. And now I think we're ready to talk about isolation forest. So as I mentioned before, abnormally are few and difference. So few in terms of the numbers, difference in terms of the property, the features. So say, for example, in the census, there is a CEO earning like $2 million a year, but only have a primary school education. That will be a kind of outliers, right? That's actually a sample points that it pick up in the US Census. Okay. And also, so there's also other definition and observation which deviate so much from other observation as to arouse suspicious that they would generate by a different mechanism. So Hawkins, this is one of the kind of famous early day kind of definitions. So, but then this part as to arouse suspicious, now it will require humans to go through that and then to arouse the suspicious. So and people will define so many different ways to say, okay, oh, this if the data have that, it is arousing suspicious. If the data do not have that, then it's not arousing suspicious. So it's really kind of based on your judgment. Yeah. And there's another one, it's called an observation which appear to be inconsistent with the remainder of the set of data from Bernie and Luis. This is also a widely used definitions. So, and how do you say what is inconsistent? And then also you have to compare with the remainder of the data. So that part is also costly in terms of if you try to think like if we have to say, okay, these data points, is it consistent with the first of the remaining data? Is it consistent with the second remaining data? Then you'll find that this line of thinking also create algorithm that would use a lot of resources. Now I'm getting into a bit of philosophy, like how do you think affect your algorithm? And then how do you make use of your resources? So the abnormally definitions that I come up with for isolation forest is only two terms, few and difference. And we see how this thinking, so this is the anchor, this is the foundations of the method, and see how these foundations kind of make a difference in terms of the algorithm we created. All right, so defining isolations. So consider a binary tree, appoint a dataset until all points are isolated to leaf nodes. So abnormally are isolated early. So this is observations. So how do I get this observation? I was actually researching random forest, the famous predictive model, ensemble learning. At that time, we have random forest, we have C5. Those, so one from Leo Brickman, one from, I can't remember his name, but anyway, so these are two foundations decision tree model. Yeah. And so we just observed, so when I was doing research on the random forest, I observed that abnormally actually isolated early. So when it got isolated early, it to have a shallow tree depth, and normal points are isolated later, have a deeper tree depth. Now, I do not want you to confuse isolation tree with normal decision trees. So what is the difference? Let me just lay out some differences. Maybe the slide later will also talk about. But we isolation tree do not use leaf node statistics. So because we isolate each, there's no label to start with, and we isolate all the data points to leaf nodes. So we grow the tree to the full size. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So it's not a decision tree, or it's a decision tree in a way that it go left and right depending on the data property, but is not a decision tree, as in it's not using the leaf node statistic to do predictions. Okay, and we only use the what we call path length, the number of edges. So this is one edges. So from the orange nodes to the first purple node, this one edges. This is 2, this is 3. So that's called the path length. And you can see, like, if I just pinpoint xi, and also plot the average path length to 1,003, you can see a what we call a convergence to a fixed point. It is actually what we call a phenomenon based on the law of large number. I won't go into the detail, but it's like you flip a biased coin, and then you want to know the probability. The frequency eventually will converge. So same as here. So the frequency of xi as the number of path length converges. And xi is here. You can see the number of partitions required to isolate xi. xo is here. This is one of the tree that isolate xi using 1, 2, 3, 4, four partitions, and you can see the converged path length is 4. Yeah. Now, so far so good. This is probably quite difficult if you haven't dealt with a data structure or computational structure. Any questions so far? Yeah. Don't be shy. I don't bite. Okay. Now he is some pseudocode. It's very simple. And this, yeah, and you can also find the early implementation of isolation forest. If you go to GitHub, there's at least about 10. Scikit-learn also have it. LinkedIn have a version of isolation forest. In AWS SageMaker, they call it random cut forest. But this is the basic. Like what does the basic algorithm look like? That's the basic. So we have so this is the classic mode. So we need to train. So when we train, we build an iForest, and each iForest will call repeatedly multiple times the I tree. And then each I tree just recursively call itself to build daughter nodes until the data points is reached leaf node. You cannot split the nodes anymore. Now, algorithm 3 is path length. So given one data point, I want to know what is the length, the path length for this particular tree. So for each of the data points, you have, say, 100 trees. You just go through each tree, and then you might get an average, and then you can calculate the average path length, right? So far, so good? Okay, so what is the computational complexity? So we say, now let me just give you some definitions on the number of data points. N, T is the number of tree, psi is the number of samples to build each tree. So we're not saying that you have to build, well, we're saying that in the actual implementation, you can just use sample. So we take 256 data points, for example, from the training data set, and we build one tree. We resample 256 points, we build another tree. And we find that the computational complexity, sorry about that, is O psi t log psi. So there's no n in the training stage. So it doesn't grow with the number of data points that you have. So psi could be 256, t will be 100 log psi. So this is a small number. So the computational complexity for training stage is actually quite small, and it's also a constant. Now in the evaluating stage, the only variable is n. N can grow, but there's no like square or there is not exponential, it actually grow linear. Okay, so only go linear. And why is it important? Say if you have this algorithm in an online learning, then you know your algorithm complexity will not grow with the number of points oozing in, right? Coming in. So which is a good news. Because all the other method that I mentioned before, they have at least ON square. In some cases, they might have log n and n square log n, which is cheaper, may not be cheaper, it's still got log n in there, but n square in there. But all the other points that require distant measure, when you have distant measure, you have to do pairwise distant measure, then you'll be n square, right? However cheap your distant measure can be. So far so good. Yeah, this is probably difficult if you don't have a computational or algorithm background, but let me know if you want a bit more elaborations. Happy to just talk you through. What is the meaning of this? This algorithm will be better suited for online kind of operations. So you cannot stop the data coming in, and then it doesn't grow as the number of points increases. So that's the message. All right, so this is the slide that I should then talk about what's different between isolation forest and decision trees. So as I say, decision tree use leaf node statistic. You got yes and no. Isolation tree or isolation forest just use the path length. So this is example, path length is 3. And that's all we do. We do not use the leaf node statistics to predict. Okay. And some people, even in the academic community, they say, oh, it is a density measure. Now, each leaf node or each node actually cover an area of the data space. The trouble, if people say, oh, isolation forest is using density, is a density method, then each leaf or each node actually do not have a uniform kind of area. So how do you do density measure? So it will require like each node to be uniform, cover a fixed space in the data space, right? So this is also kind of try to tell people that it is not a density measure. Well, some of the variant actually turn it into a density measure. That's fine, no worries. But the original idea, the founding philosophy does not have density in mind. That's what I can say about that. Okay. And some interesting facts. So we know path length, the shorter it is, the more abnormal it is. So we flip it around, and we also included some what we call computations method for binary tree and come up with a score. And now probably hard to explain in short amount of time, but this is the formula. Yeah. H is the harmonic numbers, and also this is the formula that we use. So score of these, so it depends on what the n is, and you plug it in. And we say if the score is 0.5, then it's probably the dividing line between what is normal and what is not normal. And if it's closer to 1, that is so the data point is abnormal. And if the score is 0, then it's probably normal. So that's how we formulate an abnormally score out of the path length. So path length goes in, and then the score comes out. Okay. And this is one of the illustrations, and the curve look like this, right? So yeah, score is here, score is high, and the distribution of the score. And you can also see the pale one is high abnormally score, which is on the outside. The green one is the normal score, which is lower. Yeah. And that is what a typical Gaussian distribution look like. So far, so good. So experiment result. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 data set. Sorry, 12 data set. And you can see this is an interesting finding. So OCA is one of the method, is a nearest neighbor base, and from NASA. So it has included a lot of the pruning mechanism. So when it find its score, it will stop prune the operations and make it faster, but it's still very long. So 500,000 points, HTTP KDD cup 99, it took them 9,000 seconds. For us is 15 seconds. Yeah. And you can see the AUC, so area under curve. We do a ROC curve, and then we find the area under the ROC curve. That's how we compare abnormality detection method. So unlike the predictive modeling, probably using maybe accuracy is the basic one, like F score, precision recall, that's that kind of measure. But for abnormality detections, we use area under curve. And you can see that the AUC is most of the time is higher than other method. And for the NA, they just take too long, and no amount. Well, it was done back in 2008 when we first write the paper. We're using lab machines, so they're all core to duo, 2 core in the CPU. So not a lot of things we can do with slow method, like even random forest, local outlier factor. So they do is unable to, we are unable to finish all this experiment. Any questions so far? Okay.
Is there any question? I saw someone raise their hand actually.
Yeah.
I forgot who it was. But okay. Yeah. Maybe we can move on, Doctor.
Okay. Yeah. So this is the first paper. If you want to read about it, you can go to Google Scholar. Just check that one. There should be a link. Yeah. And I don't think I've updated. It's probably have more citation now. Now, why? At this point, of course, yeah. I mean, look like I'm breaking myself, but I just want to highlight the why this method kind of have this unusual phenomenon. This is what we call forerunner paper. So this is a new method that open up a class of different classification or algorithm that can come to existence. That's why every times when they talk about abnormality detections, they will talk about this. Now, as you do research, you probably should discuss with your supervisor. And the normal approach is get a known algorithm, look at the shortcoming, and then try to propose a way to correct that. Well, in this case, I was studying random forest, decision tree, but then find an observations, and then grow this idea into a new class of algorithm. It is a harder path to go down. So just a label, do not try this at home kind of label. Only if you're very sure. And to be honest, at that time, it took me about 3 months to convince my supervisor this is viable. And still, he said this is a gamble. And it is a gamble. But for what it is, the gamble kind of turned out all right. And just some experience for this paper, I have submitted 3 times. And usually 1 or 2 times you get it published. 1 time you get some remarks from the reviewer. 2nd time you probably can go through. I have submitted 3 times, but the paper actually got a best paper award in the conference as well. So I would say it's unusual unless you have a big insight, but usually as people start with master level or PhD, master level of study, they don't necessarily find an insight into a new area of research. So just mind you that. So as I say, do not copy or you do that at home. Okay. So this is the first implementation. If you want to look at the implementation, it's on SourceForge. Isolation Forest is an R interface and written in C. Why I write in C is that I want it to be fast. We are also planning to have a Rust implementation. So if anyone is interested, connect with me. I'll probably go back to the connect form when this talk is finished. Connect with me, and I'll tell you more about it, who I work with at the moment, and what is the opportunity to. I mean, if you implement this in the in a new implementation that breaks some of the limit, you can also publish a paper. Yeah. So GitHub implementation, or it's actually 102 of them. I particularly like David Cott's implementations. It's using C++. It's actually quite fast. Okay. So yeah. So if you look for implementation to play with, there's also one on scikit-learn, one on Wicker. So the one on Wicker is because Albert Frank is the 2nd founder in Wicker, and he was one of my thesis examiner, and he took up the idea to get his student to re-implement it. But if you like the R implementation, go for it. That's very fast. This one from David Cott is also very fast, called ISO3. So highly recommended that. As you can see, there's also like H2O implementation, Solitude, lots of them. Yeah. There's also SAS. If people are familiar with the classical analytic tools, they also have isolation forest in there. So known issues. Isolation forest will create this sort of axis parallel artifacts. So it's supposed to be a cloud, right? Right, just the edges extended. And then you have different implementations here. This is the one where I really like. Let's see, yeah, this is the deep isolation forest for anomaly detection. So I've been reading it. I hope they actually put out in implementation as well. But they can kind of make that or mitigate these issues of the axis parallel artifacts. Okay, and what are we doing at the moment? So I'm working with Waikato University on we already have a PhD student working on adaptive isolation forest. Now, the traditional way of building machine learning is that you have a training data set, you build a model, then you deploy the model for any future data, and then you predict or test with the model. Online learning is different. So you don't have 2 stages. You don't only have 1 stages. And you have to take care of concept drift and also the speed you can't control the data speed coming in. And how do you deal with it? So if you want to learn more about it, go to GitHub Reefer. On YouTube, there's also some video about Reefer. And we are actively developing that. And I would say Reefer is a scikit-learn equivalent for online learning. So happy for you to join us. And I think there will be a lot of opportunity there. Future work, now I'll probably just read them out, but it's not limited to these ones. Semi-supervised learning, what's the best way to deal with some of the labeled data? Concept drift streaming support. So when concept drift happens, how do we detect concept drift? What do we need to do to the model? Fast clustering, interpretable anomaly detections. Now, isolation forest can be used for clustering as well. So, but we're not using clustering to detect anomaly. We're actually using the structure to find cluster fast. So that's another use of the structure. Just go back to the interpretable anomaly detection. So can you say, for example, you work for bank or you work for insurance, you find a fraud, can you describe why it is an anomaly? Why do you stop it? What is so different about this? Because when you stop it, it will actually delay the processing of a certain process, right? Either it's account opening or insurance claim or sending money somewhere else. Then you have to explain why you stop them. And also OJK may ask, why do you stop this transaction? Explain yourself. Automated parameter tuning. So we have isolation forest. We suggest the sample size to be 256 and 103. Is that the best? What say there might be some domain that you don't need to use the full set of data or full attribute of data. Can we select those that is relevant to make the tree operate faster? Yeah, and domain specific applications. Would that be in cyber intrusion attack detections? Can we do something to the algorithm so that it is more capable in solving that problem as versus the fraud detections in banking? Each of these in medical application, each of these domain, do they have specific need that we can do to the algorithm to make it better for them? All right, this is question time. Yeah, I think that's the end of the presentation. Thank you for staying until now. Yeah, hopefully you get something, and also like to invite people to connect with me if you're interested in doing some research. Happy to guide you or give you some directions and things like that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Tony Liu. Yes, so very cool. Yeah, in his own words, but Dr. Tony Liu is passionate about doing high impact, high quality research, and this is proof of taking risk. Maybe to open the question, I want to ask, Doctor, is making high quality, high impact research require risk, or and does it require like bravery and convincing your supervisors, and
Yeah.
like what made you so sure that this will work?
Maybe I'm the one who actually look into the observations. So we don't do things out of just like gut feel or instinct. It's based on observations. And the observation convinced me that there is a mechanically sound kind of observation that consistently come through, which no one have discovered how to use it yet. So as I say, back to the observation that path length I think this is the observation. Pathling kind of consistently, like you can check other points on the outliers, and you can actually plot this graph, and this is converging. So I was actually doing research on classification tree, right? So, but this, and there's the fringe case where the data sample is not thick enough for them to make a decisions. And what do you do? So I will start with that, and then I look into a bit more. And then now I think the key is don't restrict yourself in one area of study. There's always possibility to branch off. And I was doing classification, but then I branched it off to abnormality detection. So do not restrict yourself, and also base your observations and try to explain it. And why is it so hard is that when you try to explain your observations, I can give my supervisor a stack of data and say, look, it is working. Now, it doesn't work that way. You have to present it in a way that people can understand, and that will take more time. So if you still go back to the scientific method, if the mechanism repeat itself without fail, try to explain it. And in this case, for this diagram, it took me a month to put all the pieces together and draw the partitions. So to illustrate to people, oh, actually there's a mechanism that the isolated points have a higher path link count than in layer point. So have a shorter path link as compared to in layer point. So that is one thing. And then also there are other things, like they were things that we also have to give a few different try. Growing to full size tree doesn't work. It takes too long. And then we try to grow with sample. It works. It still works. And there's no performance penalty. So there are tweaks that you have to put into and think outside of the square to get the algorithm to work. Yeah. So, but then if you find something that which is really groundbreaking, or if you find something which is really groundbreaking, you don't have to do it in your PhD time. You can just publish as follow your supervisor advice, then leave it when you get your doctoral degree, and then publish those groundbreaking stuff. It still work. Okay. So my advice is do whatever your supervisor guides you to do. You can reason with your supervisor. I'm quite sure they're all scholar. And if they say that there's, I mean, you still need work on that, or if you just have a gut feel, then you really have to examine your gut feel. But if you have evidence, then you have to present it well to convince people. So that's universal. That's the skill that researcher have to explain the data using, say, visualizations or tables or using mathematical formula proof, things like that. Yeah, but don't give up if you find something solid, and then just get through the hard work of learning how to present your idea, and that's what you here to learn with research. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that answer.
Hmm.
Okay, so it's about you know, making
Yeah,
sure there's a clear path, not just relying on
yeah,
your gut feeling. Yeah.
that's right.
Okay.
And find the evidence to support your argument. Yeah. I just want to show of hand. Is there any research student here that is doing machine learning research? Now I know I've been the triple AI reviewer and different conference reviewer. This day we talk about LLM, we talk about and early a few years back we have computer visions. That is the hot topic. now is the LLM. But fundamental research still have a place in that there are specific area that LLM cannot replace. Like if you want to do a credit scoring, this day is still the classification model. Yeah, and you can ask LM, it won't do that for you. Yeah. So there's still a place for this, and there's still things that you can do in this area. So yeah.
Okay, nice.
Hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions from other participants?
You can speak in Bahasa and maybe someone can interpret.
Yeah.
Don't be shy. I can understand sedikit as well.
Here, Cha Isa. Please welcome.
Hi, Chinese.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask a question about I have experience concerning with random forest data.
Mm.
What is the difference? Is the important data, the most important data and important data, and please explain me concerning with this this problem about this
Okay.
anomaly or anomaly, but the very
Yeah.
sometimes the very important data is anomaly data. So it is maybe confused to me to result about my machine learning. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So what is the difference between important data and not very? Are you referring to the variable importancy?
Yes,
Just want to clarify.
yes,
Uh,
important and very important data.
yeah, we have some notions of variable importancy later on developed by the variant. So the way we count variable importancy is that which attribute actually terminate the nodes most. So, and which attribute actually do not make any final decisions in terminating the node. Yeah, so that kind of is the variable importance. I understand the variable importance in random forest. Maybe just let me give a brief background. So for random forest, to find out which attribute is important, we take it out of the data set and train the model and see if the performance decrease. And then we do it in turns and find out which attribute is important. So when important attributes is being removed, then the model will actually suffer a lot. So that's how we learn about variable importance. For isolation forest is about the which attribute actually terminate the tree growing process. Yeah. And then you can do a statistic, say, for example. So why is it important? Because some of the dimension doesn't really see the the outlying point or the anomaly. Some dimensions can see the outlying points, and on average, if an attribute kind of help to terminate a leaf node often, then it is considered importance. We also have that in the adaptive isolation forest, where the idea is very simple. We grow 100 tree, right? And then from all the tree, we say which tree is not detecting any abnormally or is not sensitive to the upcoming data because the data may have changed. There's concept drift happening. And then we use the same kind of mechanism and see whether any data points that get terminate. Yeah. And we just drop the tree and build a new tree from the incoming data. So that is the mechanism for adaptive isolation forest. Yeah, it's very, very simple, but no one have tried and tested the method yet. Yeah. Good questions. Yeah. Eventually you will want to know which attribute is more important than the others in solving your problem. Yep.
So it
Yeah.
when the result with the important data in random forest. So I want to know about the abnormally detection. So I must edit the very important data for random forest. That's right, Mr. Tony?
I lost you for a few seconds. Maybe you can
Okay,
repeat your question. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. When I want to detection the abnormality data from the very important data. So I want to edit the one algorithm again to have the good result from this my machine learning in random forest. Something
Yeah.
like that, maybe.
Yeah, I didn't get the questions. So what because the connection is not stable. Yeah. Would you be happy to type it in the chat so I can have a look?
Okay. I want.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
No problem. No problem. Yeah. While we're waiting for Chuck, Isa,
Yeah.
normally after deciding the very important
Important.
data,
Yeah.
okay. And then what is the question?
So I edit the new algorithm again, or just check by the data, the statistic data only.
Yeah. I still like yeah, I'm not sure about the questions. I can comment on after decide the very important data. Do you mean like a threshold as to how do we say which one is abnormally, which one is not?
Abnormally, yeah.
Yeah. So here we, depending on the usage. Now, if you set the threshold to 0.5, you might get some false positive and people will move the boundary up, right? If you move it too high, then you don't get any abnormally point. Then, so it's a classical kind of what we call it. Yeah, you move up the boundary. You need to have a trade-off. So each data's domain is different. So, but I would say you search between 0.5 to 1, and that will be somewhere you can find a good threshold to decide what is abnormally and what is not abnormally.
Yeah.
And for abnormally, like for say fraud, you can stop the transactions, investigate the fraud, and then release it if it's normal.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that's the design of the abnormally score. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Tony.
Thank you. Yeah. I might just flick to the first page. So if you would like to connect me for further discussions, do talk to your supervisor about inviting me into your research. It's always a nice courtesy for them to know you're engaging external researcher. And yeah, happy to. Now, I also work with predictive modeling, ensemble learning. I also have interest in large language model.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm working with a firm that commercialize the LM model in financial space. So my interest is in insurance, banking, lending, yeah, and investment. So 4 things. And happy to engage if you have any more practical research. Sometimes it's not fundamental algorithm, might be more practicals. Yeah. So also welcome to engage me. Oh, by the way, I also we like how I met Ahmed is that we are writing research grant together for Connexi. So if you have any research grant that you'd like to like invite me to join writing grant applications, happy to engage as well. Yeah.
Okay, I think because time is up and I
Yeah.
think it's up here, Pak Tony. Thank you for
Yep.
the wonderful session and wonderful
welcome.
insight regarding the algorithm itself, ISS and Forest itself, and also about in general how to create a high quality, high impact research.
That's
Thank
right.
you, Pak Tony. We value your time so much. Perhaps
Yeah.
you have one more closing remarks before we wrap this up completely.
My mom also come from Surabaya, and it seems like you might think that I'll compare yourself to the world. You might look insignificant, but I would say don't underestimate your ability. Yeah. And is a lot of hard work, of course, to come to the world stage. Indonesia is still young, 70 something years old, 77 is it, or 70? I lost track, but you are full of energy and full and passionate for new stuff. And I was here privileged enough to be working in Jakarta between 2015 and 2021. Within this time frame, you have come up with a few unicorn and one decacorn. So well done, all of you. So continue to innovate. And if you like to talk about innovation, contact me. Happy to have a chat anytime. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. I think from that we can wrap this up, yeah, Pak Tony. Once again,
Yeah.
thank you so much, and we that's all for today. And wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Pak Tony.
Thank you. Bye for now.